Hi, welcome back to another episode of Dr. Ryder Shows Us Stuff. We are looking at the spine today and the vertebra. So we're going to learn the 5 segments of the spine, going from superior to inferior. So the first 7 vertebrae here are known as the cervical vertebrae. They are the smallest of the vertebrae. Okay. The next 12 are the thoracic vertebrae, and they are part of the rib cage because they connect to the ribs. The last 5 down here are the lumbar vertebrae, and they are the largest of the vertebrae because they can bear most of the weight. Then I'm going to turn this little guy so you can see here. We have this kind of shaped bone in the middle. It's kind of triangular shaped. That is our sacrum. It's comprised of 5 vertebrae that fuse together. And down here at the bottom, you can see our coccyx, which is also known as your tailbone. Now we're going to go through a general vertebra here, and I'm going to use a big one to start with, called the lumbar vertebrae. Right? So I'm going to go through the parts, and then I'll show you how to identify or tell the different ones apart. This big section here is the body of the vertebrae. It's what bears the weight, and is separated from one vertebra from another by the fibrocartilaginous discs. Okay? Coming off of the body, you have this little section here, which is called the pedicle. Right? So body, pedicle. You have one on each side. Right? Then you'll notice we have these kind of arms or wings that stick out. These are in a transverse plane, so these are our transverse processes. Right? These areas here, which you don't have to know, are called your articulation pillars, and they have a flattened, smoothed side that we call a facet. So this is where most of the motion is going to take place in your spine. The part that sticks out the back is called your spinous process. Right? This is the part that you feel when you run your fingers down your spine. Now, connecting the transverse process to the spinous process is this area here. This is the lamina. Okay? You have one on either side as well. Then you might have noticed there's this big hole in the middle. This big hole is called the vertebral foramen. This is where your spinal cord runs through. Now I'm going to grab this cervical here and just kind of slide it into view. The cervicals have these widened transverse processes. They have one other foramen that we need to know, and that's here. These are the transverse foramen. This is where the vertebral artery going to your brain runs through. Okay? All right, so this is the telltale giveaway that you have a cervical, because these foramen are only found in the cervical vertebrae. Okay? While we're talking about cervicals, we're going to talk about these two guys. Right? These are your top 2 vertebrae. This is C1, otherwise known as the atlas, and this is C2, otherwise known as the axis. C1, you notice, does not have a body. That's because it fuses to C2, this point here, which we call the dens. C1 looks like a washer and does most of the rotation of your head. These large things here are where the occipital condyles meet. Right? So C1 sits on top of C2 like this and rotates back and forth. It pivots around this point, which we call the dens. Okay? I'll turn it on the side so you can see how that sticks up. So axis, atlas. The way I remember the two, or the names, is that the atlas is like the book of the world, and the world spins on its axis. Okay? All right, we already talked about the cervicals. The rest of them have that vertebral foramen to identify. Next, we're going to talk about these two and how to tell them apart. This one here is your thoracic vertebrae, and this one is your lumbar. You can see that the lumbar is much bigger than the thoracic. Also, the thoracic's body is heart-shaped, but there's yet an easier way to tell them apart. If you turn them around and look at the back, at the spinous process, the thoracic looks kind of like a giraffe. Right? So that's a thoracic. And if you turn the lumbar around, it looks kind of like a moose. All right? So hopefully this video will help you learn the different parts of the vertebrae and how to tell them apart.